the next topic, and GB News, and the corresponding attacks from the right-wing media, the Express, the Telegraph, and the Mail at Stop Funding Hate. Because there's been a campaign, an ongoing campaign since GB News announced that they were going to be the new media corporation on the block, just to prevent the well-known advertisers from giving them any money, because it would taint their brand, being aligned with an opinion-based pseudo-Fox News, in which we know from the very outset that they were intending to go for this, whatever it's supposed to be, this anti-woke agenda, which feeds into some research and some comments that were made yesterday, which in themselves, I suppose, you could argue, it's in a democracy. It's fair enough for people to have an opinion. But yesterday we had Sir John Custis, who is an election expert, is a professor, who exposed how the Conservatives were running an anti-woke agenda to appeal to the prejudice of many Brexit voters in order to keep their support. So he's effectively come out and stated that the Conservative Party was hemorrhaging support, just like the Republican Party in the United States. They had to find a big niche. They had to find something to wrestle the momentum away from the Democrats in the States and from the Labour Party in the UK. And Brexit, creating division, and primarily using narrative that preys on people's bigotry and prejudices, was how they attained that. And for well over a decade, they've been massaging and manipulating language in order, again, through their billionaire corporate media. And GB News, as I said, is the new kid on the block who will sustain that and make that almost their raison d'etre, to appeal to those people who believe that they should be allowed to be racist, homophobic, sexist, transphobic. They should be allowed to have an opinion on everything, and that opinion should count as much as anybody else's. But I wonder, within our society, Tom, if you went to the doctor and the doctor sat there and made no examination of you and said, I think you've got, cancer of the testicles. And you said, oh, brilliant, doctor. Thank you very much. How do you know that? I really haven't had time to do an analysis. And it's my Boris Johnson impression, but it's not a very good one. But in my opinion, that testicle does look slightly different, and therefore, I think we should put you straight onto chemotherapy and start dealing with it. Now, if you're a type of person who just completely falls for that relationship between, that superiority relationship between a doctor and patient, and you acquiesce to that opinion, then the chances are that you're going to be treated for something that you haven't got. It's going to do a lot more damage to your body. And yet it seems that the prevailing ideology in this country now is to stop listening to people who've spent their life and dedicated their lives to systematic methods of uncovering reality. Even though on occasions it may be flawed, but to go into a new ideology that effectively says, forget all that, I can look at you and I can make a judgment, and therefore you should now move forward on the judgment I've made of you, no matter where it leads.
Yeah.
Now, I suspect, Tom, that the outcomes will be far, 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 far more negative than listening to, certainly not an objectively 100% accurate professional but I suspect that they are much more likely to get it right than the population is, who doesn't rely upon those scientific and systematic methods.
Yeah.
What do you reckon?
Yeah, absolutely. And just in case anyone was wondering, that article on Dorset Eye, long-time Remainer, stands at dispatch box and lies about Brexit. In case you weren't clear, that's Boris Johnson. In case you thought it might be someone else. Yeah, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head, Jace. That you know, what the Conservatives and the right stand for, both in America and in Britain, is something that over time no one's going to vote for. They stand for, you know, wealth going increasingly to the very, very wealthy, the top 5% or even the top 1%. We've seen that vast shift of wealth from the poorest in society and from public funds to the extremely well off, who are busy shopping for super yachts on a daily basis now. We've seen an erosion of workers' rights. We've seen erosion of environmental standards, erosion of food standards. We've seen erosion of attacks on people's rights, human rights, and we've seen a lack of housing and poor housing, lack of social affordable housing. We've seen stagnant wages, wage freezes, austerity. All, you know, increases in well, attacks on our NHS, cuts to our NHS, cuts to doctors, cuts to nurses, cuts to hospital beds, and you know, cuts to services like mental health services. This is all we've seen, and after a few years of that, no one's going to vote for that anymore. You know, 5% of the population who benefit, the very rich might still vote for it, but the rest of the population aren't going to vote for it. So what do the right do to carry on implementing those evil, vicious, divisive, murderous policies? What do? They invent these culture wars that encourages people who are being harmed by their policies to vote for them to continue implementing them. And these culture wars take various forms, but mostly, as we've seen recently, it's always been for 20, 30 years, there's been an attack on political correctness, which is a pushback from the right and from the corporate media on political correctness. And most recently, you know, coming across the Atlantic from America is this war on woke and Wokism, which is the big thing at the moment, and what GB News have spent a large proportion of the first couple of weeks they've been operating, focusing on this war on woke. And incidentally, this you know, attack on political correctness. Political correctness is, in my mind, is a force for good. It's part of the gains that have been made in society in a progressive way, progressive gains over the last 50 or so years since the civil rights movements. And we've seen both society change for the better in terms of understanding and appreciating the rights of all different people. But also we've seen laws change to put into law that people, disabled people, gay people, women, black people, have rights, have equal rights. And that's in law. And those gains were hard fought, hard won over 50 years. And the last 10 years under this Tory government in particular, there's been a massive pushback against those progressive gains because some of those gains harm profits. Ultimately, this is mostly, I would argue, about workers' rights and creating conditions, which the right always wants to do, create conditions for profitability, create the optimum conditions for capitalist accumulation. So the accumulation of profits by the very rich and wealthy. And that means compromising workers' rights for the vast majority of us. And ultimately, it's mostly about that. So this pushback against political correctness gone too far. Health and safety's gone mad. Oh, you know, so-and-so disadvantaged people now have it better than the rest of us. All this kind of nonsense, you know, that's been preached by the right for so long, and now forms this huge anti-woke agenda that's being pushed by GB News. Ultimately, it's about creating an environment that's as profitable as possible for the very rich and is harmful to the rest of us. But of course, it stokes these culture wars, these phony culture wars, which gets people, poor and average earning people, working class and middle class people, to vote against their own interests because they agree with some of these phony culture war ideas, or they agree with waving the flag and being nationalistic, or they agree that Black Lives Matter are actually a bunch of Marxists or whatever. They're persuaded to agree with these things, and it's apart from anything else, it's desperately sad, because we're now seeing huge amounts of working class people, white working class people, reading the gutter press, believing in these phony culture wars, taking part in divisive politics, and continuing to vote for policies that harm them, and that's really sad.
Yes, thank you, Tom. It reminds me of that analogy of the farmer who watches somebody walk over his land every day, and every day they walk over the land, one of the horses in the fields comes over and kicks that person, and the person falls to the ground in agony, and then gets up and crawls or staggers out of the field, and then repeats it day after day after day. But instead of the farmer pulling the person to one side and saying, look, this is how to avoid being kicked, they set up a distraction. So they either take their clothes off and go, woo, like that, or they get somebody else to do something weird, so that instead of the person learning how to avoid being kicked, all they do are distracted, so that they just keep coming back and coming back because they've never learned those skills. And that's effectively the type of society that we've created, which GB News, instead of coming onto the scene and saying, look, hey, let's make this country wonderful, let's unite everybody together, let's find out what sort of values that they think are really, really important, and let's unite together to make a long-term systemic structure that benefits everyone. No, they've come on to attack a certain demographic who want that. So we say, this isn't working, we want that. Woke. We say, the number of people being taken into custody who are black, who have died, and there's been no police investigation. Woke. We say the role of the female within society needs to change dramatically, and we have seen it evolve for the different waves of feminism. Woke. And it doesn't matter who you are. If you want something progressive and better for society and for yourself, you become not a woke necessarily because you're an activist, you become a woke for pointing it out. Yeah. So what it is, it frightens people into silence. Yeah. But also, as you rightly say, it means that those people whose diet is the billionaire corporate media, in which they're fed being whacked by a horse every single day, but are never taught how to avoid being kicked, just keep coming back for more. It's almost as if they get used to the pain, and in some part of them psychologically enjoys the pain, because what the corporate media do so well is to say, it's not you that's the problem, it's the others. And the others aren't those people who are on those super yachts or living in their mansions, on the hills above Nice. It's your neighbor. Yeah. It's the people who are gathering in the car park down the road, yeah, who've been doing that for centuries, a lot longer than you've been stuck in your little box staring at a screen in the corner. They've been doing what they're doing for a lot longer than you, but hey, they're the problem. Or it's the immigrant, the Asian, the Muslim, the Jew, it just goes on and on and on. So it's like watching EastEnders 24/7 and watching nothing else. You can see other people's misery, and somehow it makes your misery that little bit better. But if we go to GB News, because we're running out of time now, if we go to GB
Could I just
News,
say a quick thing before you do, Jace, which is, yeah, I mean, you remind me of that often spread around sort of meme, which is exactly right, which is that what's happened in Britain is the people earning £1,000 an hour have persuaded the people earning £14 an hour that their problems are caused by the people earning £9 an hour. It's often spread around, and that's exactly what's happened. It's exactly what we're seeing. We're seeing that, you know, divide and rule, blame, scapegoat, and yeah, and this, you know, war on wokeism. I'm, as I've mentioned before, I spent too much time on political debate groups, which can be inspiring in that I've come across some extraordinary thinkers and wonderful people, but also some less so, and some people with truly hideous views, sadly. I sometimes get called, I get labelled woke, or I get, you know, especially, you know, in the last 6 months or so, particularly because it's, you know, the current thing, the current trend from America, from Fox News, that's come across the Atlantic, is to label people woke, or an SJW. I get called an SJW, a social justice warrior, and that always strikes me as weird. You know, all the right can do to have a go at you is to say, you believe in social justice. How awful of you. You know, what?
You sound like Stuart Lee there.
You said, it was a bit, wasn't it? You person who believes in social justice, you know, what? So they don't, and they're proud of that. That's just bizarre to me.
Yeah. And taking it back to, you know, the focus on GB News, it's interesting how the early stages of GB News have been so chaotic. And it's just the same as Boris Johnson, who is chaotic. It's just the same as the referendum and the 5 years since the referendum result went in favour of those people who wanted to leave the EU. Absolutely chaotic. It's like this idea that actually you can govern people and you can win over support through chaos. And of course, we have to remember that the nature of neoliberalism and the so-called free market, which we've never experienced, but the so-called free market effectively leads to chaos. Because the more competing things that you have hitting against each other in order to win over that space, the more chaos and conflict you get. Mm-hmm. So if we look at this clip, and it'll be all right on the night. If anybody remembers that program going back to the 70s and 1980s, when you went through all these TV programs from around the world and things went badly. Well, this is just a short clip from the beginning of GB News of things that have gone badly. And yet, I suspect that in this time of chaos, this will be attractive to so many. It won't be perfection. It won't be people who have had all the rough edges rubbed off over years and years and years of experience in the media industry. This is people who are sat down behind a desk and this happens.
2, 1.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Cheers. Charming. Yes, that graphic wasn't necessarily describing us, but it was pretty
Thanks,
close.
everyone.
Anyways, they leave.
Well done.
A very good afternoon and a warm welcome to GB News and this premiere of McCoy and Phillips.
Yeah, it's a busy day, and all eyes will be on the Prime Minister later when he's expected to announce a delay in the easing of restrictions in England. It won't come as a surprise, but do get in touch to let us know what day a delay would affect you.
Yeah, he'll say he's acting on advice of a scientist. Has Boris Johnson been consistent? You've done your part in the last year. Has he?
And it's the 4th anniversary of the horrific Grenfell fire.
Some way to go. We'll be joined now by MP Peter Dowd, and down the line, sorry, we have not got Peter, we've got Mark Littlewood, though, from the IEA, who joins us, I think, down well, we're talking to Mark in just a moment, because those figures do show some improvement in those.
Must be part of the central curriculum.
Well, thank you there, Professor, for your views. We have to leave it there now. Professor Callum Semple.
Callum Semple.
Sorry, Nigel.
Okay.
Jeff Palmer. Sorry, I'm all over the place. Thank you, Professor Jeff. I'm a bit confused there when he.
Oh, yeah.
How do you run a roller coaster in a pandemic? I don't quite get that.
Very similar to how you run it when it's not in a pandemic, to be fair. You know,
unity and the pure joy that came when Prince Harry married Meghan. Britain absolutely got.
And Trevor, this is the reality of this situation, isn't it? It's going to be a death sentence for many businesses.
I do not find it acceptable at all that members of all this House are elected to come here to serve the constituents, not to...
As Boris Johnson puts it, for many reasons, unfair. Trevor Kavanagh.
You know, once we've vaccinated all the vulnerable, then it's once we've vaccinated all adults, then it's when everyone's had 2 jabs. Now it's once all adults and children are vaccinated. Next thing is going to be all adults, children, the rest of the world, their dog, and the aliens in space.
Well, let's hope not.
Talking weddings, I'm here at a wedding venue, not to get married myself. If I am, that's news to me.
Really cool. Actually, imagine if you're going for a really long drive in the hot desert, the car breaks down. It's okay, you can drink the exhaust, the water.
Yeah. Right. Thank you.
Yeah. I think I can't drink tea all day.
Moving on, still my story.
thermal recycling. Now that Brum and Amelia from the east of England. Amelia, let's go to you first, because you're in Bedford where there are flood warnings. There was serious flooding there over the years, particularly in the early 2000s. How likely do you think it is that there will be more flooding where you are?
Well, there's slight correction. There aren't any flood warnings here at the moment. It is actually pretty bone dry, but you are absolutely correct in that this area of Bedfordshire was absolutely decimated by flooding at Christmas last year. That was at Storm Bella.
Smoking's have been.
Tom, I don't think your microphone is working as well as it should, but you're saying really interesting things. So maybe we can sort that out, and you'll come back and let's talk further on that. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. I mean, while Tom's here, I just wanted to ask you a couple more things, if I may.
The microphone's not working.
Okay. All right then.
No,
Let's move on to Ellie, to Amelia Harper in Bedford. Amelia, you're standing there.
I'm just going to say something, because if you've seen the papers, if you've seen Twitter, some people think it's really funny to send in texts and messages that, on the basis that if we read them out, you know, we've been had. You're still doing it, and I'm watching them, and it doesn't help anybody, you know.
We're just not going to read surnames from now on.
Well, yeah. To the person who's just messaged, grow up, you know. We're a new company, we're a new broadcaster, there are systems that we're putting in place that would stop idiots like you getting through. They're getting through at the moment, but please, you know, we've got other things to worry about.
Come on now.
Mind you, if you can hear us, that's an improvement. So, thanks for all your views. All of you with serious views, we still welcome GB News
we do.
at GB News.
Now, my namesake Alex Wickham, what a great journalist he is at Politico, has revealed the government has apparently been advised. We had a little bit of an early jingle there. I think everyone thought I'd finished.
Hilarious.
Yeah. I know.
Like you say, perhaps the complete lack of professionalism, the look of it, you know, the poor production values, you know, umpteen times they've got people's names wrong in the captions, and, you know, so many mistakes and errors. It's just laughable. But maybe that's appealing to their demographic, and you know, maybe it's the equivalent of, as we know, Boris Johnson deliberately ruffles his hair to look like a ragtag scarecrow who doesn't know what he's doing. But maybe that appeals to that demographic. They find it endearing or lovable, or just different from the elite. So there's this sort of anti-elite thing that the rights do when they are the elite. You know, they represent the elite, the wealthy, privileged, but they attack the elite, especially in terms of media, and pretend they're not a part of it. So maybe it's appealing that poor production values and things. But I want to make just one last point on GB News, which is that we heard a while ago, 6 months or so ago, that GB News was launching and also a Murdoch TV channel. I found that unbelievably disturbing and worrying. I know quite a lot about Fox News and the effect that Fox News has had in America. And clearly, obviously, Fox News are owned by Murdoch News Corporation. It can destroy a society, destroy democracy. It's that powerful, really, that Fox News. And so the idea of two new, very right-wing channels, one owned by Murdoch, launching in this country, I felt was a bit of a death knell for this country. It made me start to think about moving abroad for the first time in my life. And thankfully, Murdoch has pulled the launch of his channel, and it probably isn't going to happen. And that's a good thing. But GB News, perhaps there's no need for a Murdoch channel, because GB News have launched straight into the Fox News style content. And what I mean by that, Jace, is that they purport to be a news channel, but they're absolutely not. They're an opinions entertainment channel. And just in case viewers aren't aware of this, in the last couple of years, Fox News have been sued in America for misrepresenting the truth, for lying, for not reporting news accurately. And they've been sued. And on 2 occasions, Fox lawyers have successfully argued in those court cases that they're not a news channel, that they're an entertainment and opinions channel. And they've argued that successfully, despite their name being Fox News. I don't quite know how they've been successful with those arguments, but they've successfully argued that their viewers don't expect and aren't entitled to factual news, because everyone accepts that it's an entertainment and opinions channel. And Sean Hannity, one of the, I'd say disgusting Fox News presenters, literally, said, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, I think our viewers are able to, discern the difference between opinion and news. Basically saying, yeah, we're an opinions channel. If people think it's news, then that's tough. We're not. And so yeah, their lawyers have successfully argued that. And GB News is doing exactly the same. It's an opinions channel that purports to be a news channel, but it's not. It's spreading right-wing propaganda and doing all of this. Really can be traced back to Murdoch's The Sun Says, which launched in the 70s. Before that, most news media, radio, TV, and printed newspapers, generally reported the news, maybe with different political slants, but certainly just reported the news. They didn't purport to push an opinion. And that changed with The Sun Says, with an editorial column which said, this is our view, and we're going to share it with you. This is our opinion on that. And that over the last 40 years has been replicated and multiplied across, just about all newspapers and media channels, so that we get a lot of opinion rather than fact now.
Yeah, of course, although it must be remembered that the Daily Mail very openly came out in the 1930s in support of Adolf Hitler. Yeah. So I think it's been going since the dawn, yeah. if you know what I mean. And it does worry me as well with the now prospective privatization of Channel 4, whether Rupert Murdoch might be in the running for that. And if he is, it's just going to be another death knell in terms of news broadcasting, providing alternative ideas. And they have an hour-long program, longer than any other mainstream news broadcaster in this sense. If you think about BBC One, BBC Two, ITV and Channel 4, the traditional news broadcasters before the satellites came along, And for them to lose that, or for them to have it molded and manipulated along the lines of a GB News or along the lines of an editorial process in which, as Professor Stephen Lukes talks about, it's not what they tell you, it's what they don't tell you. All the things that are left out are the most important things usually, because they're only feeding you stuff that they want you to know or think about. And that again, is just an epitome of where we are in 2021, with all that hope that people left the 20th century going into the 21st century, all that hope that they had for things getting better and changing. And what we've seen because of the politics and the politicians are things getting worse. It's a frightening, horrible prospect.